Okay, so now I will go through the codes. So first, I'll go through the characters codes first. So I just at the beginning, I just added all the new states I made. Um, Added all the animation parameters here, certain booleans that I'll need later on as well, and as well as the um, player damage animation time completion. So actually, for this, the animation time completion is it's a it's the float here, value here represents 80% or the percentage to when I decide or when I consider that the animation is complete. So, for example, um, the 0.8 float here basically represents that by 80% of the animation duration, the animation is considered done. Then eventually I have some kind of boolean which will trigger it done, which is this one, animation done. So this bool value here represents if the player is holding the sword or not. Later on, I'll require this for the switching of different states between the sheathing and the drawing. Okay, so I'll just go through the things that I've added. So there's this reset or animation. Basically, I just reset the triggers for the different um, different parameters, just in case there's any animation that randomly triggers out of nowhere. Then if I want to prevent that, I'll just call this. I changed the equip function. So instead, like for this function, it basically just instantiates the sword and puts it on the player's back. And I called it immediately in the start function here. So once the game starts, the sword's already at the back of the player. Um, okay, so sheathing. Okay, so I'll explain. Actually, yeah, I'll explain this one. So for sheathing, the what happens is you will first check if the animation is sheathing. Um, then we will check if the basically what this line of code means here. If the animation is 60% done, then proceed with whatever lines of code you want to put in. But for this one, it's basically just to parent the weapon to the back of the player. So the reason why I made use of this normalized time is because it gives it a more accurate feel for the animation. So if I'm not wrong, during the sheathing state, this is when um, so when the sheathing state is played at 60% of the animation, that's when the player's hand is near the player's back already. So I can change the transform from the player's hand to the player's back. So it makes the whole transition smoother instead of just changing the transform of the player at the beginning of the animation, which kind of makes it look unbelievable. So this just makes it more smooth. Okay, so this one is this function is actually quite important. It's made use for um, all the other states for the player. So it's similar to this. It's just that it's more flexible. So first check the animation state, animate the animation layer, then whatever name of the animation, and the percentage of completion of the animation. So sometimes it varies with different animations because some animations may be as for me it may be considered done earlier than usual, but usually I think for my case I found that the best percentage is 0.8. So usually I'll use this float value for the animation completion time. So once the animation is completed within this percentage, I turn the animation done. So this eventually you'll see that this animation done basically allows me to proceed to different states accurately instead of just um, changing state before the animation is even done. Okay, moving on. So for I have a on collision enter. This is just to check if anything that's hazardous hits me, such as the bee stinger and the zombie's hand. Uh, okay. So I'll go on to the other. Okay, I'll go for the character states first. Okay, so sorry, I'll go through the state machine. So in the state machine, I actually have this previous state. So this previous state is necessary for me so that I can keep track of what was the previous state before I change state. This is important for the melee states where after I play the animation of the melee state, it will immediately go back to the state that it was previously in. Hence this variable. And the way I keep previous state is before I even change it, before I change the current state to the new state, I set the previous state to the current state. Okay, now I'll go through the states class. Okay, so this I treated the states class as a any state um, kind of state from the finite state machine. So for the states that I want to be accessed from any state, I placed it here, at least the transition to that state. So this will include the hit state, the melee states, holding, I mean, the sheathing, drawing, and swinging, and the falling state. So for the hit state, as long as the boolean got hit is true, it will immediately go to the hit state. Um, if the if the player is not crouching and animation is done, and the basically this is the button to change from sheathing or drawing state, and for this one, the swing state. Well, the swing state can only be accessed if the player is actually holding the sword. And as for the falling state, since I want it to be accessed from any state, it's also placed here, the physics update, and you will just check if the player is not grounded, and if the player's velocity is below like negative 0.01. Okay, so now I'll go to the states I've added. Okay, so first is going to be the crouch state. So okay, the general actions done in the different states is basically at the enter during the enter function, uh, I set this animation done equals false first. Reason being is because um, this boolean is actually what allows the player to change state, and if this was already true in the first place, it will just immediately change state even before the animation is done. So I will only make this true um, once the animation is actually completed, and we saw this inside the character function. So once the animation is completed, then it will become true. Okay, so that's one of the general things. The other one is I usually play the animation at the enter, and uh, and then usually in the logic update, it will just check if the animation is done, then it will change states. That's the general gist of these states. But of course, there's going to be some variations. Like for example, in this crouch hit, uh, I have to change the player's animation boolean of crouch. The crouch parameter goes true and change the height uh, accordingly. So I'll move on to the next state, which is drawing state. So yeah, for the drawing state, uh, I would set this to be false first, show me the animation, and draw the sword. and check if the animation is done. So once the animation is done, it will go to the previous state. So like for example, I draw in the standing state, it'll go to the drawing state and immediately go back to standing state. Okay, so next would be the ducking state. Not much, I didn't change much, so uh, there's not much to go through here. So for the falling state, I mainly took the um, function, the codes from the jump state. Like for example here, this was the function for the jump state, and I just pasted it here. But yeah, so in the enter state, I mean in the enter function, um, I just reset the land parameter because sometimes it gets quite buggy when it keeps on changing states, and the landing parameter is still um, supposedly true or on, and let's say I jump, sometimes it will land mid-air, which is something I don't want to, so I have to reset this when it enters the falling state, and it will only be triggered once it's actually grounded here. Uh, okay, I think that's about it. So for grounded state, not much has changed. Hit state. Okay, so for the hit state, um, it basically decides which specific hit state it will enter. So these are the boolean that accurately checks which specific hit state the final state machine should enter. So for standing, it will basically just check if the player is grounded. For crouching, it will check if the player is holding the crouch button or is under a ceiling. And for mid-air, it basically checks if the player is in the air. So I placed the if crouching here first in the if else statement so that when it comes to standing, I don't actually have to check if the player is not crouching, because by the time it actually gets here, I can already assume that the player is grounded, plus it's not crouching. Uh, so I'll move on to the next one, which is the jumping state. So jumping state, I just removed the the lines of codes here, put it in the following state. Um, I reset the parameters before the player jumps. Before the player jumps, and the 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 value. So I have to reset this because sometimes if the player jumps and if the player was moving, the player will actually spin in the air. I have to reset the land parameter. Again, it's because sometimes the player just lands in the air out of nowhere. And I added an if statement here just to check if the player is jumping accurately. I mean, yeah, jumping accurately because I have to make sure that the player is grounded in the first place to be able to jump. Okay, so for the next one, the melee state, um, I didn't have anything here, but I left this melee state anyway because I'm I'm thinking more of in the future. I'm pretty sure the three melee states, drawing, shielding, swinging, will have something in common that I can put um, inside the melee state, so that I can just call it here instead of calling it in their own classes. But yeah, I wasn't able to think of anything, but I'll just leave it here, like just to represent that this is a possibility, and this is probably a good way to factor the code if necessary. So okay, so next is the mid-air hit. So again, trigger the animation, make it false first. Then check if the animation. Oh, okay. So for this one, um, since the mid-air hit state has multiple animations, it has to it will first run the first animation, and once that animation is done, it will trigger the next one, uh, and it will check if this animation is done, which is this function here. So once the animation is done, it will go to the falling state. So why falling state instead of standing state? Um, it's because sometimes there's random boolean or random um, trigger parameters which is turned on or is still true, and the if it enters the falling state, it kind of resets all that, and it will fix the possible issues. And since the falling state could easily just go to standing state immediately, you won't even see this happening. You won't even see the player going to falling state first, then standing state. It looks instantaneous and just goes to standing state. Okay, I'll move on to the rolling state. So, sorry, I think I missed something here. Yeah, so before okay, so for rolling state, change the height of the player. This allows the player to be able to roll through the edges, uh, play the animation, set animation down to false first. Um, okay, I need this here, but because the rolling state will only play if the vertical parameter is above 0. Um, this is how the player is moving forward. So as long as this animation is playing, the player will actually keep on moving forward. And this will check if the animation is done. So once the animation is done, um, then this will be it will go to the ducking state. So instead of okay, so it's why do we go to ducking state instead of just standing state? I'm just considering the fact that sometimes the player could roll and just stop at the bench, and let's say I immediately go to the standing state under the bench. It will look very awkward, and the player actually will go below the map. So it's technically safer, even logically, to go ducking state first. And let's say the player isn't ducking or isn't any isn't under any ceiling. The player will just immediately go to the standing state. So again, it's pretty instantaneous. Okay, I'll move on to the sheathing state. So sheathing state, it will just play the animation, change this to false first, sheath the sword, and check if the animation is true. Once it's true, once the animation done is true, then it will go back to the previous state. Okay, so for the next would be the standing hit state. Okay, so play animation, make this false, check if animation is done, then proceed to the stand state. Very general standing, not much difference from the original. All I added was the roll. That's about it. Next is the swing one. Okay, so for this sword, I only want the collider of the sword to be true if the player is actually swinging the sword. So I only set it true here. Then play the animation, and once the animation ends, it will become false again. So I'll basically disable it. This allows the player to not hit the enemies accidentally, even though the player is not swinging. Okay, so once the animation is done, it will go to the previous state. Okay, so that's the code for the player. We'll move on to the zombie enemy.